"You're just a high school teacher, Tessa? You don't even know how to manage an asset that big. It's wasted on you." That's what my brother said to me at my parents' dining table. Sunday dinner, October 14th. The roast was still warm. The rolls were still in the basket. And my 8-year-old daughter was sitting right next to me, her fork frozen halfway to her mouth. I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice. I set my napkin beside my plate, looked at Brock, and said, "I heard you, Brock. I understand exactly where I stand now." He had no idea how true that was going to be. 2 days later, my attorney filed a fraud affidavit. 48 hours after that, Brock was in handcuffs at his office. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Tessa Miller. I'm 32 years old. I teach high school math in Columbus, Ohio. I've been doing it for 9 years now, and I'm good at it. I make $68,000 a year when you count the small survivor benefit from my late husband's Social Security. Mark died in a car accident 4 years ago. He was 31. Lily was 4. After the funeral, after the flowers dried up and the casserole stopped coming, 2 things happened almost simultaneously. My father, George, took what he called an early retirement. He was 57. What that actually meant was that he'd been let go and didn't want to say it out loud. And my mother, Patricia, called me 11 days after I buried my husband to tell me they couldn't make their mortgage payment. 11 days. I was still sleeping in Mark's shirts. I was still finding his coffee mugs in the dishwasher. And my mother called me, not to ask how I was holding up, not to check on Lily, but to tell me they needed $2,400 by the first of the month. I sent it. Of course I sent it. They were my parents. I told myself that's what family did, that $2,400 became a standing withdrawal. Every single month. Mortgage and property taxes, bundled together, pulled from my checking account like clockwork. For 48 months. 4 full years. That's $115,200. From a high school math teacher's salary. I can do that math in my sleep, and believe me, I have. But the money wasn't the only thing I gave them. Last year, I noticed their homeowner's insurance had jumped by almost 30%. They hadn't even opened the renewal letter. It was still sitting on the counter, buried under a stack of Brock's old mail. I called the provider myself, spent 2 hours on the phone renegotiating their rates, and saved them $1,100 annually. They never knew. I also paid their property taxes directly that year, $4,200, sent straight to Franklin County so there wouldn't be a lien. They never knew about that either. That was who I was, the fixer, the one who made sure nothing fell apart while everyone else pretended the house was standing on its own. And then there was Brock, my younger brother, 28 years old, 4 years younger than me, though you'd think it was 14 by the way my parents treated him. Brock was the one who got the new basketball shoes every season. Brock was the one who got the graduation party with the DJ and the rented tent in the backyard. When I graduated, I got a card. Inside, my mother had written, "We're proud, keep going. No party, no tent." Just 5 words in a Hallmark envelope. Brock went to college for 3 semesters before dropping out. He bounced between sales jobs, bartending gigs, and what he liked to call independent ventures. 2 years ago, he asked me for $15,000 to invest in a cryptocurrency project. He called it the Next Wave. He had a pitch deck. It was 4 slides long. One of them was just a stock photo of a yacht. I gave him the money. He never paid it back. He never mentioned it again. When I brought it up once at Thanksgiving, he laughed and said, "Come on, Tess, that was a family investment. You don't invoice family." My mother laughed too. My father looked at his plate. Then Brock got married. Dana was 27 at the time, pretty, quiet, the kind of person who smiled a lot but never quite looked comfortable. The wedding was small but not cheap. When the caterer's bill came in $4,500 over budget, guess who got the call? Patricia didn't even frame it as a question. She said, "Tessa, the caterer needs to be handled. You know how stressed your brother is." I paid it. I told myself it was a gift. I told myself it was the last time. It wasn't. If you've ever had a family member treat you like you didn't matter, hit that like button and subscribe. Now let me tell you about the house. My grandmother, Ruth Miller, passed away 6 years ago. She was 84. She lived in a 3-bedroom bungalow on a quiet street near Clintonville. Nothing fancy. White siding, green shutters, a backyard with a sugar maple that turned gold every October. She left that house to me, not to my parents, not to Brock. To me. It was in her will, notarized, filed with the Franklin County Probate Court, and recorded on the deed. The house was appraised at $310,000. My grandmother told me once, the last Thanksgiving before she died, that she wanted Lily to grow up somewhere that felt like roots. She said, "That boy will spend it. Your parents will let him, but you'll keep it." She meant Brock. She knew. She always knew. After Mark died, I moved into that house with Lily. I paid off the remaining taxes, updated the insurance, replaced the water heater, and painted Lily's bedroom lavender because she'd seen it in a magazine and said it looked like a sunset. That house became everything. It was the one thing nobody gave me, the one thing I didn't have to share, explain, or apologize for, until Brock decided it should be his. It started about 18 months ago. Small comments at first. "That house is too big for just the two of you." Then it became, a property like that could really generate income if someone knew what to do with it. Then it was, "You're sitting on $310,000 in equity and doing nothing with it. That's irresponsible." Irresponsible. That was his word for a woman who'd been sending $2,400 a month to keep his parents housed while he blew through $15,000 on a crypto scam and couldn't cover his own catering bill. But I stayed quiet. I told myself he was just talking. Then came October 14th, Sunday dinner, my parents' house. The table was set the way Patricia always set it. White tablecloth, the good plates, candles that smelled like cinnamon, pot roast, mashed potatoes, green beans, rolls from the bakery on 5th Street. Lily was sitting next to me, her hair pulled back in a braid she'd done herself that morning. She was getting good at it. She was 8, tall for her age, quiet the way perceptive kids are quiet. Brock arrived late. He always arrived late. Dana was with him, smiling that careful smile she always wore, the one that never quite reached her eyes. He sat down, poured himself water, and before anyone had even passed the bread, he started. "So I've been looking at investment properties," he said. "There's a duplex over in Franklinton." Great bones. Rental income potential is insane. Patricia beamed. "Brock, that's wonderful. See, George? I told you he had a head for business." George nodded once and cut his roast. Brock leaned back in his chair. "Only thing is, I need capital. And I've been thinking." He looked at me, not casually, directly. "Tessa, that house Grandma left you. You're sitting on a gold mine and doing nothing with it. A HELOC against that property would give me exactly what I need, $130,000. That's nothing against a $310,000 asset." I set down my fork. "No." He blinked. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean, no. That house is mine. Lily's and mine. I'm not leveraging it for an investment property." Brock's jaw tightened. He leaned forward. "You're just a high school teacher, Tessa. You don't even know how to manage an asset that big. It's wasted on you. This house belongs to the Millers, Tessa. You're just the one holding the keys until a man in the family needs them." The table went silent. Dana looked down at her plate. George stared at his green beans. Patricia pressed her lips together, and then she did what she always did. She laughed. A short, clipped laugh, like what Brock had said was simply an uncomfortable truth everyone had been too polite to voice. "He's not wrong, Tessa," Patricia said. "You've always been more of a worker bee than a planner. Your brother sees the bigger picture." I stayed quiet, letting them continue. Brock wasn't finished. He turned slightly in his chair and looked at Lily, my daughter, 8 years old, sitting there with her fork still in her hand and her eyes already starting to glass over because she could feel it, the way kids always feel it, even before they understand the words. "Hey, Lily," Brock said, his voice dropping into that fake friendly tone he used when he wanted something to sound casual. "You might have to move into a smaller room, kiddo. Uncle Brock needs your house to build a real future for the family." Lily's chin trembled. Her eyes went wide and wet, and she looked at me with a question she didn't have the words for yet. Then she looked down at her plate and the tears came, quiet and fast, rolling off her cheeks onto the white tablecloth. Patricia glanced at Lily and shook her head. "Oh, stop being sensitive. He's just talking. Kids these days fall apart over everything." Something inside me snapped. Not loud, not dramatic, just a clean, quiet break. I looked at my daughter. I looked at the tears on the tablecloth. I looked at my mother, who was already reaching for the rolls like nothing had happened. I looked at my father, who hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, hadn't even looked up from his plate. And I looked at Brock, who was leaning back in his chair with his arms crossed, waiting for me to fold the way I always folded. I reached over and placed my hand on Lily's. I squeezed once. Then I picked up my napkin, folded it, and set it beside my plate. "I heard you, Brock," I said. My voice was steady. "I understand exactly where I stand now." I stood up slowly. I helped Lily out of her chair. I picked up her jacket from the back of the seat and draped it over her shoulders. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. I walked us to the front door. I didn't rush. I didn't slam anything. I opened it, stepped through with my daughter's hand in mine, and pulled it closed behind us. The lock clicked softly into place. The drive home was quiet. Lily sat in the back seat with her hands in her lap, watching the streetlights pass. She didn't say anything until we pulled into the driveway, and then she said it so quietly I almost missed it. "Do they really not like me, Mom?" I turned off the engine. I sat there for a moment, both hands on the wheel. "You didn't do anything wrong, Lily, not one single thing." She nodded. She unbuckled her seatbelt and climbed out. I watched her walk up the steps to the front porch of the house my grandmother left us. The sugar maple in the backyard was just starting to turn gold. I didn't know yet what Brock had already done. I didn't know about the forged application sitting in a bank processing queue with my name on a signature line I'd never touched. I didn't know that my father had handed over my social security number and a copy of the deed. But I knew one thing. I was done pretending this was okay. That night, I didn't sleep. Lily went to bed at 8:30, and I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that went cold hours ago. The house was quiet except for the refrigerator humming and the occasional creak of the sugar maple brushing against the gutter outside. The street light cut through the blinds in thin white lines across the counter. I wasn't angry. That's what people don't understand. Anger is loud. Anger burns out. What I felt was something else entirely. Clarity. Like someone had taken a dirty window I'd been squinting through for 4 years and wiped it clean in one pass. I replayed the dinner in my head, not Brock's words. I'd heard versions of those my entire life. What I replayed was my daughter's face, the way her chin trembled before the tears came. The way she looked at me, not at Brock, not at Patricia, at me, because I was the only person at that table she trusted to do something about it. And I hadn't. I'd folded my napkin and left. I sat there until 1:47 a.m. Then I got up, rinsed the mug, and went to bed. I slept 4 hours. It was the last restless night I'd have for a long time. Tuesday, October 16th, 9:15 a.m. I was in my classroom, second period, working through quadratic equations with my juniors when my phone buzzed in my desk drawer. I ignored it. It buzzed again. Then a third time. During the break between periods, I checked. 3 missed calls from First National Bank, 1 voicemail. I stepped into the hallway and pressed play. "Mrs. Miller, this is Sandra Taylor in our Fraud Prevention Department. We need to speak with you regarding a home equity line of credit application submitted under your name for the property at 4417 Elm Ridge Lane. There are some signature inconsistencies we'd like to discuss. Please call us back at your earliest convenience." I stood in that hallway with my back against the cinder block wall and my phone pressed to my ear, and I listened to that message twice. Signature inconsistencies. A HELOC application, my property address, my name. I hadn't applied for anything. I called Sandra Taylor back at 9:38 a.m. She was professional, careful with her words, but the facts were plain. Someone had submitted a HELOC application for $130,000 against my grandmother's house. The application included a copy of the deed, my social security number, and a signature on the authorization line that did not match the signature the bank had on file for me. She asked if I had authorized anyone to submit this application on my behalf. I said no. She asked if I had shared my social security number or deed with any third party. I said no. But even as I said it, the answer was already forming in the back of my mind, like a photograph developing in the dark. I hadn't shared those documents, but I knew who had access to them. I knew exactly where my father kept his files, the same beige filing cabinet in the basement office where he'd stored every piece of family paperwork since 1986. And I knew who had been sitting at that dining table 4 days ago, telling my 8-year-old daughter she'd need to give up her room because he needed $130,000. Sandra asked if I wanted to file a dispute. I told her I wanted to do more than that. I called Arthur Brooks at 10:22 a.m. Arthur had been my grandmother's estate attorney. He was 62, methodical, the kind of man who wore the same style of charcoal suit every day and never raised his voice above a conversational tone. He'd handled the probate when Grandma Ruth passed. He'd filed the deed transfer. He'd sat across from me 6 years ago and explained in plain language that the house was mine, free and clear, and that no one, not my parents, not my brother, not anyone, could encumber it without my written, notarized consent. I told him what the bank had told me. He was quiet for 4 seconds. Then he said, "Tessa, this is a felony. You understand that?" I said, "I understand." He said, "If we file a fraud affidavit and an identity theft report, this becomes a criminal matter. There's no pulling it back." I didn't hesitate. "I'm not pulling anything back." He told me to come to his office Thursday morning. He told me to bring my identification, my original deed, and any documentation of who might have had access to my personal records. He told me not to call Brock. He told me not to call my parents. He told me not to mention this to anyone. I said I understood. I hung up. I went back to my classroom and taught the rest of the day. Polynomial functions, systems of inequalities, the logic of numbers that don't lie. I didn't call Brock. I didn't warn my parents. I didn't send a text or leave a voicemail or drive to anyone's house to have a conversation. There was nothing to discuss. A conversation implies two people trying to reach an understanding. What Brock had done wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a crime committed against his own sister using documents their father handed over like spare change. Wednesday passed. I taught. I picked Lily up from school. I made chicken and rice for dinner. Lily did her homework at the kitchen table while I graded papers across from her. She looked up at one point and said, "Mom, are we still going to live here?" I looked at her. "Yes. This is our home. Nobody's taking it." She nodded once, picked up her pencil, and went back to her worksheet. That was enough for her. It was enough for me, too. Thursday, October 18th. I took a personal day. I drove to Arthur Brooks's office on East Broad Street. The building was old brick, 3 stories, a law firm that had been in the same location for 40 years. Arthur had the paperwork laid out on his desk when I arrived. The fraud affidavit, the identity theft report, a formal letter to First National Bank's legal department requesting a full investigation and permanent denial of the fraudulent application. A civil complaint naming Brock Miller as the primary actor and George Miller and Patricia Miller as individuals who knowingly provided protected personal information to facilitate the fraud. I read every page. I asked 3 questions. Arthur answered each one. At 2:14 p.m., I signed the affidavit. The pen didn't shake. My handwriting was steady, the same signature the bank had on file, the one Brock hadn't been able to replicate. Arthur filed everything that afternoon. The fraud report went to the Columbus Division of Police. The identity theft report went to the Federal Trade Commission. The civil complaint went to the Franklin County Court of Common Pleas. The bank froze the HELOC application immediately. The $130,000 that Brock had been counting on to fund his duplex dream was voided before he even knew the application had been flagged. 1 signature. 1 afternoon. That was all it took. Friday morning, October 19th, at exactly 8:12 a.m., 2 detectives arrived at Brock's office. He worked at a used car dealership on West Broad, assistant sales manager, a title he treated like it was CEO of a Fortune 500 company. They arrested him at his desk: felony forgery, felony identity theft, unauthorized use of personal financial documents. I wasn't there. I didn't need to be. I was in my classroom writing the day's lesson on the whiteboard when my phone buzzed once in my desk drawer. It was my mother. I let it go to voicemail. It buzzed again, and again, and again. 17 times in the next 40 minutes. I turned off the ringer and taught my class. By noon, I had 43 missed calls, 12 from Patricia, 9 from George, 7 from a number I didn't recognize, 15 from Brock's phone, which meant Dana was calling because Brock was in a holding cell. I deleted every voicemail without listening. At 3:47 p.m., I was walking to my car in the school parking lot when I saw them, my parents' silver Buick, parked 2 spaces from mine. Patricia was standing beside it with her arms crossed. George was in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead through the windshield. Patricia's face was blotchy. Her eyes were red. Her voice cracked the second she opened her mouth. "What have you done, Tessa? What have you done to this family?" I shifted my bag to my other shoulder. I kept my voice even. "I filed a fraud affidavit because someone forged my signature on a $130,000 loan application using my social security number and my deed. The police handled the rest." Patricia stepped forward. "He's your brother. He made a mistake. You're going to destroy him over a piece of paper?" "A piece of paper with my forged signature on a federal loan application?" I said. "That's not a mistake. That's a felony." "We can fix this," she said. "We can talk to the bank. We can explain. Just drop the charges. Call your lawyer and make it go away." I looked at her. "You gave him my social security number, Patricia. You and Dad. You handed him the deed. You helped him do this." She flinched. It was small, barely visible, but I saw it. "We didn't know he was going to... You didn't know he was going to use the documents you gave him to apply for a loan against my house? The house you knew was in my name? The house your own mother left to me specifically because she knew something like this would happen?" Patricia's mouth opened and closed. George still hadn't moved inside the car. His hands were folded in his lap. He was staring at the dashboard. "I didn't file a report against my brother," I said. "I filed a report against a criminal who stole my identity. If that happens to be Brock, that's his problem." Patricia's voice dropped low, almost a whisper. "You'll regret this, Tessa. You're tearing this family apart." I looked at her for a long moment. Then I looked through the windshield at my father, who still wouldn't meet my eyes. The same man who'd sat at the head of the table while his son told my daughter she'd have to give up her bedroom. The same man who'd opened his filing cabinet and handed over everything Brock needed to steal from me. "The family was already torn," I said. "I'm just the first one to stop pretending it wasn't." I walked around her to my car. She didn't follow. I opened the door, set my bag on the passenger seat, and started the engine. The Buick shrank in the rearview mirror. That evening, after Lily was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table one more time. I opened my phone. I went through my contacts methodically, the way I grade a test, line by line, no skipping. I blocked Patricia's number. I blocked George's number. I blocked Brock's number. I removed myself from the Miller family group chat. I deleted the shared photo album Patricia had created 3 Christmases ago. I removed George and Patricia from Lily's school emergency contact list and replaced them with my colleague, Janet Taylor, who had offered 6 months ago and meant it. I didn't do it in anger. I did it in clarity. The house was dark except for the glow of my phone screen. The streetlight cut through the blinds the same way it had Tuesday night. The sugar maple scratched lightly against the gutter. I set the phone face down on the table. I sat there in the quiet for a long time. The quiet wasn't heavy anymore. It was sharp. It was clear. I got up, checked the locks on both doors, and turned off the kitchen light. I walked down the hallway and stopped at Lily's door. She was asleep on her side, one arm around the stuffed rabbit Mark had bought her the week before he died. The lavender walls looked silver in the dark. I pulled her door shut gently. Then I went to bed and slept through the night for the first time in 4 years. The days after the filing were the quietest days I'd known since Mark died. No Sunday dinner obligations, no phone calls asking for money, no texts from Patricia reminding me about something Brock needed, no monthly withdrawal pulling $2,400 from my checking account. For the first time in 4 years, my paycheck stayed where it landed. I taught my classes, I picked Lily up from school, I made dinner, I graded papers. I went to bed and I slept, actually slept, 6 or 7 hours at a stretch, waking up to the sound of birds instead of the sound of my own dread. Lily noticed before I did. One evening in early November, about 3 weeks after I signed the affidavit, she was sitting at the kitchen table drawing while I made pasta. She looked up and said, "Mom, you hum now." I stopped stirring. What? When you cook? You hum. You didn't used to. I hadn't realized, but she was right. The weight I'd been carrying for 48 months was gone, and my body knew it before my brain caught up. I let it ring every time. Patricia called from different numbers, twice from payphones, which I didn't even know still existed. George never called once on his own. A woman named Rebecca from their church left a voicemail saying she was praying for reconciliation. I deleted it without finishing it. Brock's attorney sent a letter to Arthur requesting I reconsider my position. Arthur responded with a 4-sentence letter declining and attaching the forensic signature analysis the bank had already completed. I didn't respond to any of it. There was nothing to add. 3 weeks passed. Then 8 weeks. The leaves on the sugar maple dropped, and I raked them into piles with Lily on a Saturday morning while the neighborhood smelled like cold air and wood smoke. She jumped into every pile I made. She laughed so hard she got the hiccups. Nobody called. Nobody showed up. The phone stayed silent. The mailbox held nothing but bills I could pay and flyers I could recycle. It was the first real peace we'd had in years. The information came in fragments over the following months, never because I went looking for it. Arthur kept me updated on the legal proceedings because he had to. The rest filtered in through the quiet, persistent machinery of a small city where people talk. Brock's arraignment was in late November. He pleaded not guilty. His public defender, a woman named Sarah Collins, who handled 60 cases a month and looked like she hadn't slept since August, requested a continuance. The judge granted it. Brock was released on $25,000 bail, which Patricia and George posted using the last accessible portion of George's 401k. By January, the pretrial hearings had revealed the full scope: the forged signature, the unauthorized use of my Social Security number, the copy of the deed that had been removed from George's filing cabinet and scanned at a FedEx location on East Main Street at 4:47 p.m. on October 11th, 3 days before that Sunday dinner. The bank's forensic handwriting analyst confirmed in a sworn deposition that the signature on the application bore no resemblance to my verified signature on file. It wasn't even a close attempt. Brock had apparently practiced twice on a legal pad and decided that was sufficient. The civil complaint moved faster than the criminal case. Arthur's filing named George and Patricia as individuals who knowingly facilitated the fraud by providing protected personal documents, my Social Security number, my deed, my date of birth, to a third party without my consent. Their attorney, a solo practitioner named David Harris, who charged $275 an hour, advised them to settle rather than face discovery. Discovery would have meant depositions. Depositions would have meant George sitting under oath and explaining exactly when, why, and how he opened that filing cabinet. They settled. The legal fees cost them $18,000. It came out of the retirement cushion George had left after cashing out part of his 401k for Brock's bail. Patricia had to close the savings account her own mother had started for her in 1979. In February, Dana filed for divorce. It came out during Brock's pre-trial discovery that the forgery wasn't an isolated event. Dana's attorney found $22,000 in credit card debt across 3 cards, all opened in Dana's name, all signed by Brock, none authorized by Dana. 2 of the cards had been maxed out funding what Brock called operational expenses for the duplex deal that never materialized. The third had been used for a $3,200 weekend trip to Nashville with 2 friends Dana had never heard of. Dana moved back to her parents' house in Springfield. She took the dog. She took her grandmother's china. She didn't take anything with Brock's name on it. Brock's plea deal came through in April. Felony forgery was reduced to a 3rd-degree felony with a guilty plea. He was sentenced to 3 years of probation, 400 hours of community service, and full restitution to First National Bank for the processing and investigation costs. His credit score dropped to 441. A felony conviction appeared on every background check for every job he applied to from that point forward. The used car dealership had fired him within a week of the arrest. No other dealership would touch him. No financial services company, no real estate office, no insurance agency. By May, Brock was stocking shelves 3 nights a week at a grocery distribution warehouse near Groveport for $14.50 an hour. Patricia and George couldn't keep up with the house without my $2,400 a month. They'd never been able to. The mortgage alone was $1,650, and the property taxes were due again in June. George started driving for a rideshare company, which at 61 with a bad knee meant 6-hour shifts that left him limping by Wednesday. Patricia picked up part-time work answering phones at a dentist's office 4 mornings a week. Together, they were pulling in about $3,100 a month. It wasn't enough. The house went on the market in July. They listed it at $189,000. It sold in August for $171,500. After the remaining mortgage balance and closing costs, they cleared less than $30,000. They moved into a 2-bedroom apartment off Sullivan Avenue, shared laundry in the basement, street parking, no backyard, no cinnamon candles, no white tablecloth. A woman from my department at school, Karen Davis, lived 2 blocks from the apartment complex. She mentioned it to me once in the teacher's lounge, carefully, the way people mention things when they're not sure if you want to hear them. She said she'd seen George carrying grocery bags up the stairs. He looked 10 years older. I listened. I nodded. I didn't ask any follow-up questions. There was nothing to add. The last piece arrived in September, almost a year after the Sunday dinner. Arthur forwarded me a summary of the final civil settlement closing. All claims resolved. All restitution payments scheduled. The fraud affidavit was part of the permanent record at First National Bank. The identity theft report was filed with the FTC. The house at 4417 Elm Ridge Lane remained titled solely in my name, unencumbered, exactly as my grandmother intended. I read the document at the kitchen table. Then I closed the folder and set it in the filing cabinet in my office, the one with the lock. The cut was clean. 1 year later, October of the following year, I was in the backyard with Lily. She was 9 now, almost as tall as my shoulder, still quiet, still perceptive, but different in ways that mattered. She'd made honor roll in the spring. She'd joined the school art club and come home with charcoal smudges on her fingers 3 days a week. She had a best friend named Emma who came over on Saturdays, and they'd spend the entire afternoon drawing in Lily's lavender room with the door open and music playing from a little speaker on the dresser. The sugar maple had turned gold again. I was raking. Lily was sitting on the back porch steps with a cup of apple cider, watching me the way she sometimes did, like she was cataloging the moment for later. "Mom," I stopped raking. "Yeah?" "I'm glad we don't have to pretend anymore." I leaned the rake against the fence. I sat down next to her on the steps. The air smelled like cold leaves and the last of the late-season mums I'd planted along the walkway. "Me too, Lily." She took a sip of her cider. "Will we see Grandma and Grandpa again?" I didn't rush the answer. I owed her that. "I don't know. Maybe someday if things change. But right now, this is what's best for us." She nodded. She leaned her head against my arm. "I have you. That's enough family for me." I put my arm around her. We sat there on the porch steps and watched the gold leaves catch the afternoon light. The house was quiet now. It was finally the home Mark wanted for us. Some doors close so better ones can open. I never regretted a single second of it. If you enjoyed this story about protecting your children and knowing your worth, hit that like button and let me know what you think in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell for more stories just like this one. Thanks for watching.